everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Erica, and in this video I'm going to be sharing all of my tips on how to ace the SAT. Before we get into this video, I just want to say that whatever you get on the SAT does not determine your self-worth, how successful you are, or where you're going to get into college. Especially now that so many universities are adopting a holistic review process and veering away from standardized testing, you really shouldn't put so much stress on how you perform on the SAT. Additionally, I am a firm proponent of the notion that the SAT tests really whether you can master a standardized test as opposed to assessing a person's intellect. So I guess I'll begin this video with some background information. I am a high school senior. I took the SAT without essay once during December of my junior year, and I got a score I was satisfied with, so I haven't taken it since. I know a lot of people recommend taking the SAT at least twice, and I fully support that, especially if you didn't get your goal score the first time around. Also, a lot of colleges super score, meaning that if you did really well on the reading and writing section the first time you took it, and then a lot better on the math section the second time you took the test, then you can combine those scores to get an even greater composite score. And the last thing I'll say before I jump into my tips is that everyone is at a different starting point, and therefore in this video I'm going to be sharing general takeaways and themes that I've gotten from my studies as opposed to specifics that may only be applicable to a certain number of people. So my first piece of advice is to take a baseline test. So the SAT itself is composed of a 65-minute reading section with 52 questions, a 35-minute writing section with 44 questions, and 80 minutes worth of calculator and no calculator math questions. And so the purpose of taking a baseline test would then be to identify which of these areas are your strengths and which of them are your weaknesses, and that way you can really focus your studies on the areas you need to improve in and not spend as much time in areas that you already excel in. My next tip is that you get out of your studies what you put in. Now, naturally, there are going to be people that don't have to study that much and will do really well on the SAT. But it's important to recognize that even if you're not in that boat, if you commit yourself and really put in the work, you can improve your score and perform just as well as those people. My next tip is to check your answers. Now, at least for me, when I was doing practice tests, when I finally completed them, I wanted to be done with them. And I didn't want to check my work, and I didn't want to read through all of these answer explanations of why I missed certain problems, but if I'm being honest with myself, that's where the bulk of the learning took place. It was after the test, going through and really understanding why maybe A was a better answer than C. And the benefits of this really played out when I was taking the actual SAT and I saw a question and I was like, oh, I know that exact question type, and when I see that, this is the technique that I employ, whereas, oh, here's another question type, and this is the most effective way to get to the answer. My next piece of advice is to take an entire SAT exam before test day. Now, I know for a lot of people it's really easy to carve out maybe 15 minutes here or even ultimately 1 or 2 hours to really take like a reading section or a math section, but to really sit down and take the entire 3-hour test is really quite the commitment. However, I would highly recommend taking an entire test from start to finish in one sitting because ultimately on test day that's exactly what you're going to be doing. And if you've only had practice doing 1 or 2 hours at a time, the last hour is really going to drag on and you're going to need that stamina because obviously this is a time test and you don't really have the opportunity to slow down. And my last tip is to study actual SAT questions. Now, I know there are a lot of test prep books out there like Princeton Review and Kaplan where they will give their versions of SAT questions. However, if you want to make studying most effective, you have to study the actual questions that you're going to see on test day. And this brings me to the next section of the video where I'm going to be telling you what books to invest in. Now, personally, I only purchased 2 books. The first was the SAT Blue Book. I have it right here, and this baby is just a book full of actual SAT tests. And so this was really helpful to assess my strengths and weaknesses, see if I was improving, etc. These tests are also available for free on the College Board website as well as on Khan Academy, and I'll leave links to both of those below if you would rather use those instead of the paper version or if those suit your needs better. The other book I invested in was the SAT Black Book, and that was recommended to me by a friend who, shout out to you Haley if you're watching this video, thank you, you're the best. But basically the SAT Black Book gives a ton of techniques on how to answer certain types of questions, whether they're reading, writing, or math, and then also includes full SAT practice tests with revised answer explanations. So the SAT offers answer explanations for all of their practice tests. However, oftentimes they're not really that helpful because they'll say answer A is wrong because answer C is right, as opposed to answer A is wrong because a clear, explicit reason. And so this is where the Black Book comes into play, because it actually goes through and says, this word is wrong because it actually means this, or this answer choice is wrong because there was no evidence of this, not this answer was wrong because it's wrong. And as I mentioned before, it also includes a lot of different techniques of how to approach question types that are really handy and will save you a lot of time. In particular, if you're someone who took a baseline test and then didn't finish a certain section, this could be really helpful. And so overall, I would recommend the Black Book to anyone who takes it. I unfortunately don't have mine with me right now to show you guys because I'm lending it to a friend, but yeah. Invest in the SAT Black Book. I guess while we're on the topic of resources, I should mention SAT tutors and test prep classes. Personally, I didn't invest in any of these programs. However, I've had friends who have, and they've said that they've gotten great results. In particular with tutoring, it makes it a really personal experience, and that way you have a mentor who's already gone through this process that can help guide you along. Now that being said, I know that tutoring and these classes are quite expensive and they may not be accessible to everyone, and that is why I would also highly recommend Khan Academy. They have a program on their website that is in collaboration with the College Board that includes official SAT practice tests, which I mentioned earlier, as well as just test questions in general, and step-by-step videos on all of the topics you need to know for SAT Math, SAT Writing, and SAT Reading. And if you're just a high school student in general, I'm sure you've heard of Khan Academy before. Their videos are super helpful, whether they're for the SAT or for just random high school subjects in general. Another thing I think worthy of mentioning, not necessarily related to SAT specific resources, but just that studying for the SAT is not a week-long commitment, and for most people, not even a month-long commitment. It really is quite a long process. I know when I was preparing for the SATs, I watched a lot of videos on YouTube like this one, and one of the people I watched said she studied for 2.5 years, and she ended up getting a really great score, which goes back to my second tip, that you get out of your studying what you put in. But that is to say that you should start as soon as possible. Now, I don't recommend starting freshman year, however, maybe at the end of your sophomore year when you're less busy, because at least at my school, freshman and sophomore year aren't super busy, but then junior year hits and you're like, wow, I have no free time anymore. And so if I had started studying a little earlier and spread out the process, it would have alleviated a lot of the stress I felt during the months leading up to when I took the SAT. And going off that point, the sooner you can take the SAT while still being prepared and have the skill set necessary to take the SAT, the better. Now, there are certain classes that it really is recommended you take before you take the SAT. So obviously you're not going to be taking the SAT freshman year, as I said before, but if you can take it partway through junior year or even at the end of junior year, and you don't wait until the beginning of your senior year, that's going to really take the stress off of you when you're applying to colleges. Now, obviously 2020 is different because a lot of tests have been canceled and people who were scheduled to take the test in the spring weren't able to. However, if you are not currently a rising senior, I would highly recommend taking the test as soon as possible. So that is basically all I have to say for this video, and I guess I'll just leave you on this note. If you're taking the SAT for the first time, you should really try not to stress so much because, well, one, scientific studies have proven that increased stress levels correlate with decreased performance, and two, you have plenty of opportunities to retake the test if the first time doesn't go how you would have liked. Personally, when I was taking the test, I was a bit anxious. However, when I realized that, hey, if I don't do so well today, I can just take it in the spring or next fall, it really wasn't so scary anymore. Now, if it's October or November of your senior year, then maybe you are a little bit more rushed. But if you're not in that boat and you still have some time, you should really try and just do your best and know that it's going to work out no matter what you score. And with that, I wish you all good luck on your SATs. I hope this video was helpful, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Bye!